Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at round number 1 of Norway chess here in Stavanger. Now, Norway chess is probably one of the absolute strongest chess tournaments of all time. You have players 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the tournament, and you have Wei Yi from China, who is currently ranked, I believe, number 8. So, with 6 of the top 8 players in the world in this event, it's going to be a very strong tournament, and we are going to start with my first round game with the black pieces against my compatriot from the United States of America, Fabiano Caruana. Now, Fabiano and I have played a lot in recent times, but I have done very well against him, starting with my win against him in Norway chess here in 2023, the Grand Swiss and Isle of Man, and of course, the very recently concluded American Cup. Nonetheless, I have the black pieces, and Fabiano remains as dangerous as ever. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the action. Now, the game starts out with the move d4. Now, when I played Fabiano in the recently concluded American Cup, he also played d4 in the final game, so it didn't come as a complete surprise. So I play d5, Fabiano plays c4, and now I play this move c6. Now, it was very clear to me that Fabiano was surprised by my choice. The Slav is not a system that I've played very much in recent times. The lone game where I think I've played the Slav defense in the last decade, yes, you heard that right, the last 10 years, was in the 2024 Candidates Tournament when I drew against Nijat Abasov from Azerbaijan in round number 3. So, this clearly came as a surprise to Fabiano. That being said, Fabiano is considered to be the best prepared player in the world, so I expected him to play a very challenging line. Therefore, I was very surprised when Fabiano traded and played this move knight c3, as this leads into a very drawish system, which is known as the exchange Slav. Now, the reason this is considered so drawish is due to the symmetrical nature of the pawn structure here. It's very hard to generate much counterplay. So we get bishop f4, knight c6, e3, and now I play the move a6, and here Fabiano plays move knight f3. Now this is the last moment where white can go for something a bit more interesting with a move like bishop to d3, for example, followed by knight ge2 with ideas like f3 and g4, but Fabiano decides to play like Abasov did against me in the candidates with this knight f3 move. Now there's nothing wrong with knight to f3, but after the move bishop g4, black is simply rock solid here. We get h3, takes, e6, bishop d3, bishop d6, bishop g5, and now I play the move bishop e7. Fabiano castles, I castle, and now we get the move rook c1. Now, up to this point, I was completely in preparation. Of course, even though I haven't looked at this line super recently, it is something that I've had in tournaments, so I do feel very good about the situation. So, after we get rook c1, I play the move h6, bishop h4, and now I play the move knight to e8. Now, at this point, I'm still in book while Fabiano is already burning time on the clock. We get the move bishop g3, I play bishop d6, and now white will no longer be able to keep the two bishops on the board. Fabiano goes knight a4, I trade, and now I put this knight on d6. Fabiano plays knight c5, and here I play the move rook c8. Now, it's very important that I don't get careless here and play a move like queen to e7, because if I go queen to e7 in this position, this is a huge mistake, as white can sack the horse with knight takes pawn. If I take the horse with the queen, I lose the horse on d6, and now white simply has 7 pawns on the board. I'm down a pawn, and I'm in really, really bad shape. If I capture with the knight here, then white takes this knight, and either way, I'm down a pawn, and I'm going to resign the game very soon. So that's why I play the move rook to c8, as now knight b7 will not work, as I capture the knight, and my rook guards the knight on c6. So Fabiano plays a3, and this is where I spent my first big chunk of time on the move a5. Now, I'd seen similar positions to this, but one of the things that's important is when you come to the game, you have to try and work out the ideas and how to make them work. Now, one of the moves that I considered here was the move knight to a7 or knight to e7. Both of these moves I know are playable, but ultimately I played the move a5 for a very simple reason. If white is able to get the pawn on b4 here, the knight is glued to the square, and the pawns on a6 and b7 are permanent weaknesses here, and even though it's probably still okay for black, it feels a little bit dangerous. So, that is why after the move a3, in this position, I decide to play the move a5. This stops white from playing b4, and later on, I can play the move b6 to kick this horse out of town. Fabiano goes queen g4, and this is the first move that really surprised me. Now, of course, Fabiano here was trying to keep the game alive, but honestly, I think Fabiano's just opening choice, and the approach was simply bad. What I mean by that is when Fabiano played the exchange Slav, I'm not quite sure what he was expecting. Maybe he thought I wasn't prepared. I was just coming up with stuff on the fly. So he played something very drawish. But then at this point in the game, he suddenly decides here that he needs to play for more. He can't just make the quick draw against me with the white piece in the first round, because the audience or whomever, everyone's going to be very unhappy with him doing this. So Fabiano goes queen g4. I play queen e7, we get queen d1, and now I play the move b6, kicking the horse. We get knight a4, b5, and here Fabiano goes knight c3. Now, during the game, I went into what is known as the confessional box or confessional booth, where you can give some thoughts about the game, and at this moment, I actually started feeling very optimistic because I expected knight c5 here, and after this move e5, the knight can jump to c4, the center is exploding, and I think if anybody is better here, it should be black with these knights. So Fabi goes knight c3. I play knight a7, guarding this pawn on b5 here with the knights from being captured, and now we get the move queen e2. Here I play queen d7, overprotecting the pawn again, and now Fabiano plays b3. I go rook c6, rook c2, rook c8, rook c1, and here I play the move g6, trying to create some space for the king and stop the threats on the diagonal from the light square bishop. Fabiano goes h4, and here I play king g7, we get g3, and now I play the move rook a to c7. Now what's happening is that I'm trying to line up for the legendary triple stack on the file, or what is commonly known as Aliekin's gun, after the former Russian world champion. Fabiano plays queen d2, queen c8, and now we get the move knight e2. Now, it's important to note that at this point in the game, I offered Fabiano a draw. Now, in this tournament, there's a 30-move no-draw rule, meaning you can't offer a draw before black has completed their 30th move. But having played 30 queen to c8, I offered Fabi the draw. I figured pieces are coming off the board. It's just a very boring game. Let's go and play the Armageddon. Now, to my shock, Fabiano played the move knight to e2 relatively quickly. Now, this really surprised me for the following reason. When you look at the time here, I am up 30 minutes on the clock, and I haven't mentioned it yet in this video, but the time control for this tournament is for the first 40 moves, you have 2 hours, but you get no extra time. After move 40, you get 10 seconds per move. But the fact is, Fabiano is already down to 13 minutes. I have 44 minutes. He's down half an hour on the clock, and it's really hard to see a world where white can really be better or win the game. But Fabiano decides to play knight e2. We trade off all the rooks here. What happened? My screen glitched for a second. Okay, that was very weird. We get takes, and now I play the move knight to c6. Now, at this point, I didn't really think I could be better in this position here because maybe I can go b4 at some point, but there's not a whole lot happening on the king's side, so it doesn't feel like very much. Fabi plays queen c3, and this is the first moment that I start to have a little bit of hope. Now, what I thought Fabiano should have played here was something like bishop to d3, b4, a4, knight e7, and then something like f3 with king f2 here, and I don't really see how either side can be better. White can't attack anything on the queen side. The bishop's staring at an open diagonal. My queen can't infiltrate either, so it should be a draw. When Fabi goes queen c3, now I go b4, takes, and even though this should be within the reach of a draw, if anybody is better here, it is black due to this very, very bad light square b. The bishop isn't really targeting the pawns. The bishop is also very passive on b1, and has no squares available here. So at this point already, if anybody is better, it is black. Now, add on that I'm up 32 minutes on the clock, and this is simply a dream situation to be in because there is no risk for me, and now I will start to put pressure on the clock and potentially on the board as well with these knights. So I go knight d6. Fabi plays knight c3. Already an important move here because if white were to play a move like f3, after knight b5, suddenly these knights are very active. Say you play something like king g2, there's knight to a3, and already knight c3 maybe saves it, but this bishop is so passive here. It's stuck on b1, and the knights are dominating the game. So Fabi plays knight c3. Logical move. Stops any knight b5, knight a3 business, and now I play the move f5. Fabi goes f3, g5, takes, king f2, and now I play the move knight c6. Now, this move is designed to try and create a ghost or a phantom in the position. Here, I was basically trying to tell Fabiano that what I'm going to do here is after king to f6, if he does not play f4, say he goes bishop c2, I'm going to play f4 and undermine this pawn structure, and even though it's still probably a very easy draw with knight e2 and takes, it's possible to see the ghost and become afraid of this pawn being weak, black having a better pawn structure. With so few pawns on the board, the game will be a draw anyway, but I was hoping that Fabiano would see the ghost, he's low on time, and sure enough, he plays the very, very bad positional move pawn to f4. Now, one of the things that I actually was sort of feeling early in this endgame, let's say go back here, is that if I could get a position like this, for example, where I can have the structure of the 3 pawns versus these 3 pawns, and white can't go f3 and e4, I figured I would have some chance to win. And the other structure which we get in the game, which I was very happy with, is this one with g4. Now, the reason this f4 move is so bad is now, even though all my pawns are on the same color as the bishop, they're squares for the horses. The horse can go to e4, the horse can go to h5, and go to f6. If I can maneuver these horses correctly, maybe I can create some chances and win the game, especially because Fabiano is down to his last 30 seconds. Now, Fabiano is getting 10 seconds per move here, but 10 seconds is not enough time to accumulate and build up any significant margin. Now, I'd also point out that one thing I mentioned in one of my post-game interviews is that there have been many endgames that I've seen in the past from the greatest endgame player of all time, a certain former world champion by the name of Magnus Carlsen, where he's played a lot of endgames with bishop and knight versus knight, or two knights versus knights, where he's gotten these structures where he gets the pawns like this, and then he's able to bring the king to the queen side and win the game. So this was also in the back of my mind. All right, back to the game. We get the position after g4. Fabiano goes king d2, I go king e7. Already here I felt that maybe I should have played knight c6 to try and reroute the knight immediately, and you'll understand why I was regretting this once I played king e7, because now when Fabiano goes bishop b5, what I optimally need here is I need a situation where I can put the knights on these two squares. f6 and d6, you have maximum coverage of e4 and h5 as well to hit the pawn, and this way I can try to run the king to the queen side. If I can achieve this setup with these knights on the perfect squares, I might be able to win the game, especially considering the time situation. But when Fabiano goes bishop b5, I have a problem here, which is this knight on b4 cannot get to f6 as the bishop is covering both the c6 and the a6 squares. It's also important to note that if we reach an endgame like this, for example, this is simply an easy draw here for white after king a3 because the knight always covers the e4 square. And even if I get this situation, if I go knight h5, there's always knight e2. So my knight can never take advantage of the white knight on c3, meaning that I need both the knights on the board in order to try and win the game. So after bishop b5, I go king d8, we get this, I go here, and now I play knight c7, and Fabiano correctly plays the move bishop c6. Now what I was really hoping to be able to do is get this knight to a8 and start maneuvering all around the board, eventually bringing it to this f6 square and getting this optimal setup where the knights are active. But when Fabiano goes bishop c6, I can't get this knight to e8 and f6 here, and already at this point I thought there was a very good chance the game would be a draw. But you'll see I have 29 minutes, and this is where I spend a good chunk of time on the next couple of moves here, because I'm trying to come up with a way to maneuver this knight and get it to the f6 square. So we get this, I go here, we get this, king e7 here, knight b4, we go back, and now Fabiano rather strangely plays the move bishop d3. Now what I thought Fabiano should do here is simply wait with the king. Basically just leave this king on the square where it can guard the pawn against the knight h5 threat, and my knight on b4 is being dominated by the bishop. I can't get the knight into the game, and I think this simply should be an easy draw for white. Instead, Fabiano goes bishop d3, and now I play knight g8, we got bishop b1, knight f6, king e1, and now I play the move king d6. Now, this is still probably well within the realm of being a draw, but what I'm doing here is I'm reaching a situation where this knight now is free squares on a6 and c6, so now it's a matter of keeping the game going, putting the pressure on the clock, and eventually finding the right square for this horse. Now, it's really inexplicable that Fabiano did this. I do think if he had 5 minutes on the clock, he probably leaves the bishop on b5 and makes the draw, but this is why time pressure is a real thing, and you really need to manage your time well. So we get knight f6, Fabiano goes back, I go king d6, knight a4, and now I play knight d7, king c6, and here I go knight a6. We get bishop d3, knight c7, and now you'll notice that at this point in the game, I'm able to activate the knights, getting the perfect harmony with the jumpers, and here already, I think it's very tough to play. We got knight c3, I go knight f6, not knight e8, of course, because then white would check, trade, and this would once again be a draw. So I go for the move knight f6. Fabiano plays the move knight to a4 here, and now I play the move knight e8, we get knight c5, and now I go knight g7 guarding the base of the chain. Fabiano plays knight a4, and this move is the move after which there is no coming back. Now, Fabiano has 47 seconds left on the clock. It's not an easy spot to be in here, but what he needed to do was simply wait with king f2. I think even king e2 maybe would be a draw here, but when he goes knight a4, this actually loses the game on the spot, because here I can go knight to e4, and white cannot guard the pawn on g3. You'd love to go king f2 to guard the pawn, but you can't go to f2 because of the knight here, meaning you have to trade, and now I take with the f-pawn, and at this point, I have a great bastion for the knight where it can attack all of the pawns via this f5 square, and also my king is running to the queen side here to chase this pawn on b3, and at this point, this is simply GG, why not? So Fabiano goes knight c3 here. Knight c5 would have been very slightly more challenging, but after knight to f5, king to f2, I can go king b5, takes, king b4, knight c5, and after this move king c3, even though white is temporarily up a pawn here, this f pawn is blockaded by the knight, and white is simply going to lose the game. If white goes king e2, I take the pawn. If you play knight b7, I go king d2, and we're going to have a situation very similar to the game where this e-pawn rushes up the board. So Fabi goes knight c3, knight f5, king f2, and now I go king b6, and this is what is known as Zugzwang in the classic language of Deutsch. Now, Zugzwang is when you don't want to make a move. It's where you want to stand still, you don't make a move, but in this position, somebody's got to move, and unfortunately for Fabiano, it is his turn. Now, black is actually not in Zugzwang either here, because even if you were to get something like this with the king on c6, white still has to move the knight and yield the square, or move the king and lose one of these two pawns. So Fabiano goes check, I go here, king b4, knight b7, and now I take the pawn, we get knight a5, king to c3, and here white simply cannot guard all the pawns. I'm going to go king d2, win this pawn on e3, and at this point the game is all but over for Fabiano. So we get knight b7, I go king d2, we get knight c5, I take, Fabiano checks here. If Fabiano were to capture this pawn on e6, I can simply go knight to f5 back, and I'm pushing my p here. I'm going to go e3, e2, check king d1, and I'm pushing the p, I'm promoting to a queen, and I will win the game in short order. So Fabi goes check, I go here, knight c5, knight f5, he takes, and now I play the move king to d2 to escort the p and promote to a queen, and here Fabiano Caruana resigns the game, and with that I get a huge victory in the first round to take the temporary lead in the tournament. Now, there is another very big game going on, which we are also going to recap now, and these are going to be my live reactions, because while I was playing this game, there was the battle of the former world champion, the 5-time world champion, Magnus Carlsen, and the current champion from India, the rising junior, Gukesh. Now, this game, of course, has a lot on the line. It's the first time the players have played since Gukesh became the world champion, and I had no doubt that going to this first round game, Magnus was going to be out for blood. So, we get the move d4 from Magnus here, and now Gukesh plays the move knight f6. We get knight c3, d5, and here we get the move bishop f4. Now, this is what is known as the Jobava London, named after the famous Georgian grandmaster from the country, not the state. This is a system that has picked up a lot in popularity in recent times. I actually played this against Magnus in one of the Chess Champion Tour events last year online. He played this against me in the first Chess Champions Tour of this year, so it really should not come as a big surprise to Gukesh. However, Gukesh spends a couple of minutes before playing c5, we get e3, and now we have the move bishop g4, bishop e2, takes, and we get the move knight c takes e2. Now this opening, as you can tell, is not actually great for white. Black is very marginally better perhaps, but this is sort of how Magnus Carlsen wins a lot of games. He gets a position where you just play, you keep the piece on the board, you maneuver forever and ever, because at the end of the day, neither player is stonkfish. So, we get the move knight c6. Magnus goes knight f3, e6, c3, bishop e7, knight g3, and now we get the move castles from Gukesh. Magnus plays queen to e2, and already here Magnus is being very, very clever. You're probably thinking, why does Magnus play knight g3 and queen e2? Why doesn't he castle the king out of the center like we tell beginners to do? The reason for this is that Magnus actually wants to delay castling as long as possible so that potentially he can start pushing Harry the h-pawn and try to generate an attack on the king side. So here Gukesh plays move h6, and already here this move that I think it's not terrible, but I do like the computer recommendation of a5 here, basically trying to force white to castle right away because black is going to start a pawn storm on the queen side, so white is going to have to get back to the basics. Instead, we get to move h6. Magnus plays rook d1 here. Now it's very clear, I think, to Gukesh and everyone who's watching at home, that Magnus Carlsen is either castling to the king side or he's going to push p and attack. So we get the move queen to a5 being played. A3 here from Magnus, we get rook to d8, and this is simply a mistaken move for. Now, Gukesh here should have played the move queen to a6, offering the trade of the queens, and you'll see why in a second. If queen a6 were played here, probably Magnus is no better choice than to trade the queens here and play an endgame. Black has the double stacked pawns on the edge of the board, but the fact is, with the ideas of putting a rook on the b file down the road, these white pawns are simply not great. But after a3, we get rook d8, and now Magnus plays the move h4, and here we get the move queen to a4. Now, this is simply Gukesh, I think, unable to calculate straight lines to the very end, and he starts to lose the threat. Once again, queen to a6 would have been the best move here, trying to force the queens off the board. Instead, we get queen a4, and now after knight to e5, takes, Gukesh starts to realize the error of his ways here, and he plays the move knight d7, bishop f4, and we get queen a6. The problem is now Magnus is able to play the move queen f3, keeping the queens on the board. I will firmly say that had Gukesh played queen a6 here, where the queen has no scope on the diagonal, or even here, queen a6 again, I do not believe that Gukesh would have lost this game. Spoiler alert. But we get this position here, and now after queen a6, queen f3, Magnus has the queen on the board. He's trying to attack on the king side here, and it's starting to feel a little bit dicey to play. Now, of course, the computer laughs, as always, and thinks black is fine, and the computer is much better than us humans. But remember, as a human here, you're already starting to feel the Magnus effect. You're starting to become a little bit concerned about this phantom attack here. You think bad things are happening, and that means you start to also underestimate your position. So here we get bishop d6, Magnus goes knight to h5, and already, even though we get the trade of the bishops, this knight here is permanently spying the pawn. The queen is spying the pawn on h6 here, and you also have ideas like rook to h3. Now, we get the move e5 here from Gukesh. I don't know why my screen's acting up. I apologize, you guys. Maybe the browser's a little bit tired. But we get e5 being played. Now, computer prefers pawn takes pawn, but I think after queen takes e5 and queen takes d5, or even queen g4, it starts to feel a little bit scary once again with the checkmate threats, the pawn on d5 hanging. I guess after g6, rook d5, there's knight b6, and apparently black is winning here, as white is unable to castle, and with the open d file, it's very, very problematic. But at any rate, that's not what Gukesh plays. Now, I won't fault Gukesh at all. He's starting to feel the Magnus effect. He's starting to feel the pressure in this game, and he plays the move e5. We got queen g3, queen g6, takes, and the move knight g3. Now, at this point, this is another Magnus special where we're in an endgame that is equal, quote-unquote, but black has a slight weakness with the double pawns. So we get takes, c4, and now Magnus plays move knight e2. Now, Magnus has made a living out of winning these sorts of endgames throughout his career. I would say more than anything else, this is his specialty, is winning equal endgames. And when you look at the fact that white has a slightly better pawn structure here, f3, knight f4, it feels like Magnus is going to put some real pressure on Gukesh. That being said, in the World Championship match, when Gukesh was under pressure, he showed great resilience defending tough positions, so maybe the same will happen here. So we get b5. Magnus goes knight c3, knight f6, and now we get the move rook to b1 here. Not knight takes pawn, because now after rook a b8, knight a7, and rook b2, black has a passed pawn. You also have the kebab and all these threats on the second rank, and if anybody is better here, it would be black. So we get rook to b1. Now Gukesh plays rook b8. Of course, now if you go to something like king f7, takes rook b8, this is simply bad, because after knight c3, the rook is guarding the pawn. So we get rook b8. Magnus plays f3 here. We get a5. Now Magnus goes b4. And this is a very interesting choice for Magnus to play this move. Now what Magnus is arguing here is that in the center of the board, at some point he can play e4. If black goes for the classic end peasant maneuver here, Magnus is still arguing these two pawns are big weaknesses in the endgame, and only white can be better. Now, if white were to go knight e2 and black gets b4 here, it feels like black is pushing the p, and white is still probably fine after king d2, but the advantage is very, very slim. So we get b4. Now Gukesh goes for end peasant. If Gukesh were to capture, by the way, this would be very bad, because now the knight blockades this pawn. You can't push the pawn. Actually very similar to my game against Fabiano, where I had that knight targeting the two pawns, but it was blocking the pawn from going up the board. So we get end peasant. Rook takes pawn, b4, takes. Now we get rook a3, rook e8, and here we get the move king d2. Gukesh goes rook b2, king d3, takes, rook a5, and now we get the move rook g3. Now, at this point, the position is completely equal according to the computer. Gukesh has survived the worst of it, but that being said, the game goes on, and one of the big knocks on Gukesh's game is that when he gets low on time, he is more prone to making errors. He's a little bit less of an intuitive player than, say, Magnus or myself, and so maybe Magnus can squeeze some blood from the rock or from the stone. So we get rook to f1. Gukesh plays g5, we get takes, and here Magnus plays move rook a1. Gukesh plays h5, and now we get rook to a8, takes, king h7, and Magnus goes e4. Now this position should be a draw, but what you will notice is that Magnus has the big white center. He's trying to push the p up the board here. Gukesh has the outside pawns, but he only has this one pawn marching up the board, whereas white has two pawns in the center. So even though this should still be a draw, it is tricky. Now here Gukesh takes the pawn, and this is a move after which it's still a draw, but the computer was screaming for this move h4, because after white goes e5, knight h5, knight takes d5, h3, rook a1, now there's simply the move h2, rook h1, and after rook g2, apparently knight c7 keeps the game alive. You go knight e3, I think there's just knight g3, white moves the rook, you move the rook and queen the pawn here on the next turn with the knight covering the square. If white takes, after takes, black moves the horse, pushes the p, queens the pawn, and wins the game. So h4 is what the computer is screaming for, but Gukesh takes on e4, we get pawn takes pawn, and now we get h4 being played. Magnus goes e5, we get h3 here, takes, and now we get to move h2. Now this position is still a draw with perfect play, but when Gukesh goes for this, now Magnus is going to be up a piece, and this is going to require perfect precision. Now, I would have preferred to move like rook g3 here personally, and after king c4, knight g4, simply because the pawn is so close to queening. And now after white goes e6, I think again you can play something like knight to f, oh not knight f6, oh knight e3 here, and then knight to f5, stopping the pawn from promoting, and you have h3, h2 still in the back of your pocket. Should be enough, because when you go h3 takes h2, now Magnus goes f7, we get rook to g3, king d2, and we have queen, Magnus queens, and at this point both sides have queened their pawns, but Magnus has an extra horse here. So if Gukesh is not precise and does not find the exact sequence of moves, he is just going to lose this game without a fight. Now, in this position, I do think that it might have been easier to queen first, but it probably transposes anyway. We get the move queen to h6, and this move loses the game on the spot. Now, it's still a draw after rook to g2, and the reason it's a draw here is that if white goes knight to e2, black can go check, king to d3, queen to h3, king d2, queen h6 back. If king d3, you do the same thing. And if white tries to go to d1, it's the same problem where you check, and there's always a bit of the yo-yo here with the 3 squares for the queen. Now, is this obvious with 23 seconds and only a 10-second increment per move? Not at all. And I don't think even I would have found this if I were in this situation. And that sort of speaks to why I really didn't like this idea by Gukesh to play h3 and h2, because even though it's a draw, if you are not perfectly precise, pinpoint precise with accuracy, you are just going to lose the game. And sure enough, Gukesh plays move queen h6. We get king c2, check, king b2, we got queen to b6, and now Magnus goes king to a2 here, and shockingly, black is just lost in this position. The reason black is lost here is that if you go queen to e6, now I can play d5, you have no check on e2, after check, I go king a3, no checks anywhere here, which means that white is going to start having a field day with the queen and the rook and win the game. And after we get the move rook g2, king a3, queen b2, king to a4 here, now Gukesh simply cannot perpetual the king. If you go queen to a1 check, I go king b4, rook b2, and now I go king c5. The queen guards the rook, there's no way to check the king, and now white is going to checkmate the black king in a couple of turns. So here Gukesh decides to play queen c3. This just loses though, because after queen to h8, we get king g6, rook to a6 check, king to f5, queen f8 check, king e4, and now after the move rook to e6, Gukesh resigns the game. If he were to go king to d5, white can simply go rook to e5 check. If you take, there's check and mate here, with the king stuck on c4. If you play the move king c4, I can just check the king here and win the queen. There probably are other ways to win as well. So you can't go that way, and if you go king to d3, there's queen to f3, checking the king, attacking the rook. If you go this way, I take the rook with check. If you go this way, I check with rook c6, winning this queen here, and it's just an epic disaster, and GG on the spot. So, after this move rook to e6, Gukesh resigns the game, and this means that Magnus Carlsen in the first match between him and the young world champion results in a victory for the GOAT. So what does that mean for the tournament standings? What that means is that after round number 1, there is a two-way tie for first place between Magnus Carlsen and myself. We both win the classical games in our respective games. We both get the big wins. Tomorrow will be another big day, as I will be playing against Magnus with the white pieces. At any rate, a very jam-packed start to this tournament with a couple of decisive games. Really, really exciting for the fans. So I hope you guys, if you're watching at home, enjoyed it as well. But if not, and you're just catching up with this recap here on YouTube, I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with more recaps after my game against Magnus and for the rest of this tournament here in Norway. Hope you guys enjoyed the jam-packed action, and see you very soon. Have a great rest of your evening, and keep it real. See you. Bye.